one of the questions in his book is, okay, what do you consider to be Christianity? As a secular atheist Jew in a same-sex marriage, when you talk about Christianity, what are you talking about?
All right, well, some very interesting things happening politically inside the church. We're going to keep talking about this, with BYU kind of holding up Jonathan Rauch as a model for Christianity. This episode is brought to you by Go and Do Travel. I'm the official spokesman for Go and Do Travel and the Journey of Wisdom cruise. Very excited about this. We're going to talk about the philosophies of men. We're going to Athens, Greece. We're going to the Greek Isles. We're going to Turkey. We'll be visiting Istanbul and Ephesus, and then down to the pyramids and Memphis in Cairo, Egypt. Going through the teachings of Paul and John and Abraham and Joseph of Egypt and Moses, and comparing those, contrasting those with the philosophies of men and what our culture seems to be so steeped in now. Going to be an incredible cruise. September 12th to 24th, this September 12th to 24th, I'll be doing this trip with Bruce Porter. Go to cwicmedia.com, scroll up to the top to trips and events, and then go down to Journey of Wisdom. I think this will be one of my favorite trips. Now, on to the interview. All right, welcome to Cwic Show. My name is Greg Mattson, and I am your host. In this episode, we bring back again Dan Ellsworth. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you.
Good. This episode, by the way, is brought to you by our new Substack, Alive and Intelligent. If you like the content of Cwic Media and our Cwic Show podcast, as well as our Cwic Week weekly articles, you're going to love what you get from Alive and Intelligent. Alive and Intelligent is actually what Cwic means. CWIC means alive and intelligent. You're going to get a much bolder, a much more in-depth amount of content in that Substack. And Dan is one of our contributors, and he has an article coming out here very shortly on the evangelical. Let me get the title. There is no evangelical church. Why don't you go over what triggered you to start writing this article?
I'll tell you what happened. We had an explosion of news recently from an individual named Jonathan Rauch. Okay. Now, he is a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, which is a think tank. And he's a great writer, great public commentator. And he started talking a lot about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he wrote a book called Cross Purposes, where he has like a huge amount of a chapter devoted to the church, like who we are, what do we believe.
And there's a lot of Latter-day Saints that are all like, yeah, this is great. and it is great to a certain extent. But
Right. But part of what is interesting about hearing him talk about us is he describes himself as a secular atheist Jew, and he's in a same-sex marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so here he is in his book promoting Latter-day Saints as a model for the rest of America to follow when it comes to our approach to our religion and politics. Now, he has an interesting argument in his book. His book is called Cross Purposes. And what he says is, and this goes back to things that the founding fathers of our country said, that our constitutional government is for a moral people. You can't just do this with anybody. It has to be a people who have a sense of morality that is deep and well-grounded, right?
He's very Madisonian.
Yeah. Correct. And he, as a secular atheist Jew, has come to an awakening that Christianity is supposed to be that thing that creates the moral society that allows us to function with this constitutional government.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you are a conservative-leaning person and you have, over the years, you've paid attention to how our country has gone with the decline of Christianity and how that has impacted not just our politics, but a lot of other things, you're going to say, yeah, he's absolutely right. And glad that, people like him are actually seeing this thing that we've been talking about for a long time. The decline of Christianity has consequences in our country. And so Rauch has this really, it's a very interesting book, and he's a great guy. He went and spoke at BYU. He had a good sit down with President Dallin H. Oaks, because President Oaks a few years ago gave a talk down here where I live at the University of Virginia, where he talked about how we as Latter-day Saints should approach politics. And it was outstanding. He wasn't just talking about Latter-day Saints. He was talking about Americans in general. What's the ideal way to approach politics? And it was a remarkable talk that President Oaks gave at UVA. It was fantastic. And Jonathan Rauch said, after he kind of came to this awakening, he stumbled across this talk from President Oaks, and he said, this is exactly what is needed. This is what is needed. And so in his book, he makes a very good case that much of Christianity has been kind of watered down over the years, and it has been mixed with other things like politics and secular culture and things like that have kind of watered it down to where it doesn't have the authority that it once had, right? And so he says, as a result of that, Christians are struggling to be that different voice in politics that brings everybody around to, reasonable ways of dealing with each other. So all of this is really great, right? This is what he gets right. He makes a great case for all of these things. Now, when you look at the fine print, yes, this is where we kind of struggle. Because one of the questions in his book is, okay, what do you consider to be Christianity? As a secular atheist Jew in a same-sex marriage, when you talk about Christianity, what are you talking about? And he quotes a Catholic theologian who said that Christianity, he said, what do you think is the essence of Christianity? And this Catholic theologian told him 3 things. And he said these 3 things are: be not afraid. And so it's be not afraid, and
be like Jesus Christ.
Yeah, follow Jesus Christ, emulate Jesus Christ, and forgive.
Yeah, forgive.
Those are the 3 things, okay? Wonderful things, definitely powerful principles in Christianity. But Greg, you know as well as I that if we were to go around just preaching those things, nobody would rally around that banner. Nobody would. And so, yes, those are great things, but Christianity is a message about what Christ has done and is doing, right? That he atoned for our sins. He lived this model life, atoned for our sins, died on the cross, and was resurrected. That is the Christian story, and now we have forgiveness of our sins, and we're all going to be resurrected. It's not just these nice ideas that this Catholic theologian gave to Jonathan Rauch. Now, if you're Jonathan Rauch and you're a secular atheist, those are great principles, but we know as Christians that there's a lot more. If you want people to rally around something, you can't just.
Well, and he takes it and he overlays it with Madison, right? Yeah. With a few of Madison's principles. And he says, oh, here it is. It's the same thing. Madison's principles are Christian's principles. It's the same thing. And he is very, to give him credit, he's very founded in the founding fathers, right? He's very founded in the principles that created America,
right, to
begin with, right? But here's where I run into issues on this with Rauch is that basically his speech with the Wheatley Institute at BYU, which had a standing ovation, right, is all about compromise. Now, look, when America was founded, you had 13 different colonies, different religions, and dominated in each of those states. And different denominations of Christianity, and so you there's definitely a requirement for for compromise. I mean,
right.
Things fell apart at first, and they started with the Articles of Confederation that fell apart. They had to come back and add things and change things and end up with a constitution. And but there are things you cannot compromise on.
Correct.
Right. And so you have an idea of, okay, well, you have your beliefs, I have my beliefs. Let's both shorten our beliefs a little bit here so that we can find some things that are in common. You can do that politically. Politically, that can work to some degree and needs to work.
If you're talking about tax rates, okay, let's meet in the middle. Here's where I am.
But if you're talking about, I mean, for me, for example, I would say if you're talking about the family proclamation, I can't do that.
Right. Correct.
I can't compromise on that.
Correct.
And if that starts running into politics, which it very much does these days, I can't compromise on those things.
Right.
So the message, the highest value here is not compromise, which is what I hear from him.
Yeah.
There's a much higher value to me than which is truth.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about a religious conviction, it's not always the best message to me.
Correct. I agree. And now he has an entire separate book on the importance of truth seeking, which I think is a great idea, to write a book on that. The challenge is, and I'll say this as well, and we've talked about this, there was a shift a few years ago when we saw just the full-blown flowering of Marxist ideology in our politics.
Mm-hmm.
And Marxism is a giant totalizing worldview that does not compromise on anything. And so when you're dealing with that, it becomes difficult to find a partner, a dialogue partner, who cares about truth. Because with Marxism, it's all about power. All of it is about power. And, Marxism has this fusion with postmodernism in our time to where the whole tool set is about how do you acquire power, and nothing else matters. So that is, I think it's wonderful to compromise when it is needed. I think to have the disposition to do that is a good thing. But what we are dealing with now in politics is there are worldviews at work that just simply do not compromise. Now, as Latter-day Saints, we can stand apart from those things to some degree, but there needs to be honesty among people like Jonathan Rauch about the nature of the debates now. That there's a rival religion to Christianity. So I'm 100% with Jonathan Rauch when he says Christianity is the backbone of our constitutional democracy. It's essential. You cannot do this without it. But right now, it's not just a secular liberal ideology that is contrasting with Christianity in our public debates anymore. Now it's Marxism, which is its own religious ideology. So anyway, I would like to see him write a book that talks about that says, what happens when another religion has come along that is going to try to pull Christianity out of the equation altogether, totally suffocate it, right? Because that is not something that he covers in his book.
Yeah, well, even for him, I mean, that not only suffocates Christianity, it suffocates the principles of the founding of the United States, which he is enamored with, right? Yep. And so for him, that's what's going to go to his heart.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that, right? When there is no compromise from the opposition.
Yeah, and that's the elephant in the room, right? Yeah. That's the elephant in the room of his book. I think his book makes outstanding points, but there is that elephant in the room.
So finalizing this, there is no evangelical church. Why is there no evangelical church? And this is part of the title of your article.
So this speaks to what Jonathan Rauch wants to do with his project. He wants to persuade American Christians that, hey, if you get back to the basics of your faith and don't allow it to be diluted by these political commitments and other things, it will be that load-bearing thing that carries our democracy. That's what he's saying. The problem is, who can actually say that? Like, if you were to create an initiative, right, to help people make adjustments to their thinking in that direction, how would you actually do that? Now, as Latter-day Saints, we gather twice a year for general conference, and we have like a handbook of instructions and all of these things that where we actually have an authority who can tell us, hey, here is what we should do with our political thinking or our strategies for this or that. We actually have like the ability to come together cohesively. And that's an incredible blessing as Latter-day Saints. Evangelicals, if you're looking to evangelical Christianity for that kind of thing, I'm sorry to inform you, Jonathan Rauch, it's not going to go well. If that is who you're trying to target to, have a group come together and change fundamentally how they do things, it's going to be a lot harder. And in the Substack, I explain in detail why that is.
Yeah, and that's very interesting. It really is something. I mean, when you look at how Latter-day Saints are able to mobilize, in anything, whether it's disasters or some other mission directive from the top,
it's incredible.
You're going to get a mass of volunteers or money or whatever it is that they're trying to get, right. That is the power of a hierarchical structure in your religion.
And I get sometimes as Latter-day Saints, we can find that frustrating. We want kind of more freedom than we sometimes have. But man, when a crisis happens, you see how incredible it is to be part of a group that can mobilize. Because nobody can do it like we can. Literally nobody. Nobody
can. The structure that we have is built for that. It really is. Dan, really appreciate your words. This is just a tip of the iceberg for the article that you'll get in Substack. We're going to give you the link to Alive and Intelligent. That's the name of the Substack in the description box. Please go there, or you can go to cwicmedia.com, cwicmedia.com on the homepage there, and get the link to the new Substack. Dan will be a regular contributor, and we're very excited about that. Dan, thanks for coming on the show again.
Thank you.